What's going on, movie lovers? My name is Frank Reynolds, and welcome to the second episode of Is It Worth It Movie Madness. Really exciting that we've gotten two of these in back-to-back weeks here. I mean, I don't know if we're kind of rounding the corner on this COVID thing, and we're going to finally start getting new movies on a weekly basis here. Regardless, it's really cool to have that opportunity to kind of start this year off in Q1 of 2021. Last week, on the first episode, we talked about Disney's Raya and the Last Dragon. And this week, I'm really excited to talk about one of the biggest niche releases in recent memory, and that is Zack Snyder's Justice League. If you're wondering why I didn't just call it the Justice League, this review is probably not for you. This is tailored to a very specific audience because superfans of the DC Universe have been clamoring for this film ever since the original was released in 2017. Quick little history lesson / backstory on that. The Justice League is DC's equivalent of the Avengers. Over the course of 3 to 4 years, DC was building to this climactic event with the Justice League film. But during production, director Zack Snyder's daughter unfortunately passed away, and he had to step aside from filmmaking duties. This led to DC hiring Joss Whedon to complete the project, and his vision was much different than Snyder's, leading to a very different movie than what would have been provided had Snyder been able to stay on board. Fans of the DC Universe didn't exactly like Joss Whedon's version of the movie, and thus there has been this petition for years now. Like I said, the original came out in 2017, to release the Snyder Cut. After much time and honestly against all odds. I mean, when's the last time one of those petitions actually worked against Hollywood? DC and Warner Brothers got together and allowed Zack Snyder to step back into the fold, gave him almost $80 million to reshoot and re-edit the film, enhance deleted scenes and concepts and storylines from before, and give audiences his original take on the Justice League, which is 4 hours long versus the 2-hour cut we got with Joss Whedon. So you can tell there's a lot of differences between the two versions of the films. And I have to say, the newer version, the Snyder Cut, the one that's technically not canon, is a substantial improvement. I don't remember the first film that well. What I remember is how I felt leaving the movie theater in 2017 after seeing it. I haven't watched it since. I felt I didn't hate it like some people did, but I didn't love it. It's not necessarily a good movie, it's just there for entertainment purposes, which is very different from the Avengers and those films, which are not only built for entertainment, but they're pretty solid films as well. Very difficult to do when you have 5 to 10 central main characters and you're trying to tell a story in under 3 hours. Joss Whedon's movie does a really bad job at characterizing individuals and pacing. Those are two things I distinctly remember, and this isn't a surprise. DC tried to match Marvel's sheer intensity when it came to releasing these films and building to something so climactic as a Justice League or an Avengers. The difference is that Marvel gave us 5 or 6 individual solo films leading to that climactic event. DC didn't do this. They only gave us backstory really for Superman and Wonder Woman. Even Batman's solo endeavor is more or less a sequel to Superman. So things are kind of rushed in the Justice League. There's a lot of assumptions made, and then there's characters who are introduced for the very first time that we're just expected to understand with no prior context as to why we're meant to do that. Zack Snyder tries to right this wrong in his take by extending the narrative to allow for that character development. It's a great decision, and it's one of the reasons I was really excited for this film. I rewatched Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice prior to Zack Snyder's Justice League, but I watched the Ultimate Edition. The Ultimate Edition is similar to the Snyder Cut in that it's an extended version of what we originally got. While Zack Snyder did direct Batman vs. Superman, he was limited and constricted by Hollywood's, desire to cut down on the runtime. So the Ultimate Edition extends the plot. A lot of people wondered how this would benefit the movie because one of the main issues with Dawn of Justice was that people found it boring and too long. But I think one of the reasons for that is because the pacing is clunky. There's concepts completely cut out that make the Ultimate Edition a superior film despite it being the longer version of what others consider a boring film. It's kind of confusing, but I would recommend going back and watching the Ultimate Edition before the Zack Snyder Justice League cut, because it really does serve as a nice reminder of what's happening in the world, and it will be beneficial to you as a viewer. What I didn't do is go back and watch all of the DC Universe. I mean, first off, this is not technically canon, but secondly, I haven't been that invested in this universe. I saw Man of Steel when it came out. Liked it. Good movie, in my opinion, from what I recall. Dawn of Justice, fine. Ultimate Edition, good. Wonder Woman, the first one, again, solid, but I didn't love it. I thought it was a little overrated. Suicide Squad, actually found it a bit underrated, but still not great. There's a theme here. None of these movies were sticking out to me the same way that Marvel movies did. And things only kind of went downhill from there. I mean, Justice League, the first cut is not very good. It's action-packed and it's entertaining, but not a good movie. I didn't even bother with Aquaman and Birds of Prey. And then Wonder Woman 84 is definitely a bad film. I really disliked that movie in a lot of different ways. In summary, DC fans have been praying for something they can get behind in the DC Universe, and we're really hoping that the Snyder Cut was that. With the Ultimate Edition of Batman vs. Superman showing that this is maybe possible, it gave people hope. And that hope led to a solid outing by DC, a really solid film. Zack Snyder's Justice League is broken down into 6 parts plus an epilogue. So it almost watches like a miniseries versus a movie. It's also shot in a 4:3 aspect ratio rather than the standard 16:9, which is a little strange at first, and both of those blended together what made me wary at the beginning of the film. I was like, am I gonna like this? But it didn't bog down the narrative. It actually helps with the pacing and the aspect ratio. I mean, whatever. It didn't bother me. So that was a good thing. And the breaking down of the epic into these parts, it actually made me consider if other long movies like the extended version of The Lord of the Rings would have benefited from a similar structure, because it really does this movie justice. Okay, that wasn't intended. It's the number one reason why the Snyder Cut works as a film. The pacing is great. It doesn't move too quickly. It moves a little slowly at times, but that's okay because we have to introduce like 4 new main characters. You can't rush that. You can't expect an audience to get behind these guys without some kind of context as to why they should do it. Right off the bat, you can tell that this is the movie that Snyder wanted to show people and this is a story he wanted to tell. The attention to detail compared to what I recall from the first movie is crazy, but if we're not even looking at it as a comparison, the attention to detail is great from just a storytelling perspective. This is apparent in the very first scene with Aquaman and Batman. It serves as a great introduction to a new character, and also simultaneously a great reintroduction to a character we got to know in the previous film. And speaking of Aquaman, his introduction's done very well. The introduction for the Flash is done well. I think Cyborg's introduction is done well too. I literally know next to nothing about these characters outside of this universe. I have seen some seasons of the Flash TV show, but that's neither here nor there. For all of these guys, we are slowly fed bits of information. It's not info dumped on us like it was in the last film. It's done really well, and it's done in a creative way. This is stuff that's only possible with a 4-hour film. I applaud Snyder for taking the time to go back and do this because it's just satisfying. Now, it's not perfect. There's a lot of Snyderisms throughout the film. I mean, if you know Zack Snyder as a director, 300, stuff like that, he employs a lot of the same tactics in this film. They aren't necessarily as successful. For instance, the use of slow motion and epic music and everything is completely over the top. There's ridiculous widescreen cinematic shots at times here, especially in moments that aren't necessarily meant to be epic, that have you almost rolling your eyes. Again, I know this is a Snyder staple, but it does try a bit hard at times to make the moment feel a bit grander than it really is. Some people are gonna love this, so this is just maybe a personal thing. It's not for me, but that is in the movie, so take that as you will. And the villain, Steppenwolf, certainly an improvement over the original one. I remember seeing that first movie and not caring at all about this villain, thinking he was not only clunky dialogue-wise, which is kind of still the case here, but just from a developmental perspective, it just rough around the edges. And certainly not as epic or personable as a character like Loki, if we're comparing this to the Avengers. Much better villain. But in this version, we get so much more backstory and motivation, and it makes him more relatable and therefore better, but still not perfect. Wouldn't have been my choice of villain. However, as the movie progresses, you understand why this is the choice of villain, and it does set up future Justice League installments should the Warner Brothers / HBO team decide to extend the Snyderverse. So, is the Snyder cut of the Justice League worth it? Yeah. Look, again, it's hard not to compare these films to Marvel, and to this point, I'm not sure there's been more than one film in this DC universe that's better than any Marvel movie, but this one is better than many Marvel films. This is how you need to tell a DC film. It's not exactly lighthearted. There's not a lot of comedy. It's a bit too dark. The story feels a bit too epic at times, but it's good. I mean, you watch this and it's an exciting watch. It's fun. You actually care about the characters, which is so crucial in a superhero film. It's not just a bunch of people with powers doing cool stuff. It's people that you relate to and you care about, and you finally get that feeling in the Justice League that Zack Snyder has provided us. I would definitely recommend this. On the worthy meter, I gave the Justice League, Zack Snyder's cut, a 74 out of 100, and I'm not going to rate the first one because it's been so long since I've seen it, but I can't imagine it getting higher than a 55 or 60 at best. So that's a significant improvement for a movie that's more or less the same. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's edition of Is It Worth It? Movie Madness. Later this week, got the first of a two-part review I promised you guys last week in anticipation of the third novel in that series release next week? Week after? Really soon. Hence why we're doing a two-parter. We're talking about the You series by Caroline Kepnes. If you aren't familiar with it, it's one you're not going to want to miss, but I'm sure you've heard of it based on its hit television companion, You, on Netflix. This week, we're talking the OG first one, You. Next week, we're talking the sequel, Hidden Bodies, in preparation for the third novel, You Love Me. Thanks again, guys. Keep watching films. Keep reading books. I love doing these with you. And if, again, you have suggestions, hit me up, let me know, and I'll try to get them out to you. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Have a good one.